Okay, so the gospel writer John has put together a chronological timeline for the last year of Jesus' life. And he's been dropping these hints and mentioning different feasts to let us know when things are happening. In John chapter 6, Jesus fed the 5,000 on the green grassy hillside. Only in the spring was there green grass that grew in that hot and arid climate. In chapter 7, the Feast of Tabernacles is introduced, and that took place in the fall of the year, sometime around October. Then the healing of the man born blind in chapter 9 followed sometime after that feast. So for the most part, chapters 7 through 9, and maybe even the first half of chapter 10, are in the fall of the year after the Feast of Tabernacles. And then there's another break that was addressed last week that shouldn't be missed. It's another chronological marker that keeps us marching towards the cross. In John chapter 10, verse 22, it says, "At the time of the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem, and it was winter. And Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. And the Jews therefore gathered around him and were saying to him, 'How long will you keep us in suspense?'" So the second half of chapter 10 probably took place about 3 months after the first half of that chapter. And he is continuing a shepherding theme at that time. Jesus dwelled on this theme for some time. It was the thrust of his message late in his ministry. And I think that did a couple of things for him. I think it effectively identified him as the Messiah, as the Good Shepherd, and it also accused the leaders of doing a poor job. And this ruffled their feathers to the point that they made another attempt on his life for blasphemy. In John chapter 10, verse 39 through 42, it says, "Therefore they were seeking again to seize him, and he eluded their grasp. And he went away beyond the Jordan to the place where John was first baptizing, and he was staying there. And many came to him and were saying, 'While John performed no sign, yet everything John said about this man was true.' And many believed in him there." Now, most believe that this is the end of Jesus' public ministry. He was not welcome in the temple or in the Solomon's portico anymore. In John chapter 7, the Jewish leadership had put an arrest warrant out for him in the temple. And in chapter 8, they took up stones to kill him in spontaneous anger. And they tried to stone him and arrest him again in chapter 10, and I think they would have if they could have gotten their hands on him, but he eluded them. The hatred of Jesus is at fever pitch within the Jewish leadership, but it has not yet developed into a plotting and conspiracy. The plotting and the conspiracy will be ushered in after one last miracle is done, and that is the raising of Lazarus from the dead. And that's what we're going to talk about today. John 11, verses 1 through 6. "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. And the sisters therefore sent to him, saying, 'Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick.' But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This sickness is not until death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified by it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When therefore he heard that he was sick, he stayed with them 2 days longer in the place where he was." It is wintertime. Jesus has retreated beyond the Jordan to the wilderness, and a messenger comes to him telling him that his friend is ill. When you think of Jesus, do you think of him with friends around him like Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, or do you think of him with students or disciples following him around? Every day when I go into the hospital to go to work, I see the doctors come in to see their patients during morning rounds. And the attending physicians will walk in, they will review the case, and they will be followed by a swarm of residents, interns, and med students. And I often picture Jesus like this, swarmed by disciples trying to glean information from their teacher. But I think that picture does a disservice to the humanity of Jesus. He had friends. He had people that he shared interests with and laughed with and ate with and cried with. And there is no doubt that Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus with that agape love that only God can. But this passage speaks of phileo love for Lazarus, the kind of love that is very human and very relational. His friend is dying, and he's going to walk miles to go see him, back to Judea where there is a threat against his life. And the danger is so bad that some of the disciples think that they may die as well if they go. And he loved his friend. I believe verse 4 in this passage records Jesus' message back to Mary and Martha. They didn't have any cell phones, they didn't have email, they didn't have the Pony Express. So a messenger had to bring the message to him, and he had to send the message back with that messenger. What was the message that Jesus is sending back to his two dear friends in verse 4? What's that? It wasn't until death. The sickness is not going to end in death. The sickness is for the glory of God, and it is for the purpose of glorifying the Son. That is the message that is being sent back to Mary and Martha. Now, towards the end of this story, Jesus tells the people at the graveside to remove the stone from the grave, and Martha objects to Jesus. It is going to be 4 days that he's been in the grave. It's going to smell, and she didn't want to smell her brother's corpse. In chapter 11, verse 40, Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you, if you believe, that you will see the glory of God?" Seeing the glory of God was what was promised in verse 4 in Jesus' message back to them through the messenger. In verse 11, verse 4, or chapter 11, verse 4, it says, "But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This sickness is not until death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified by it.'" What is God's glory? What is glory? It's a difficult word to define. It is, in some ways, it is tightly tied to praise and honor. In Revelation chapter 4, verses 9 through 11, John, our gospel writer, he saw the throne room of God, and he describes the scene that he sees in Revelation. It says, "And when the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, to him who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders will fall down before him who sits on the throne and will worship him who lives forever and ever, and will cast their crowns before the throne, saying, 'Worthy art thou, O Lord and our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou didst create all things, and because of thy will they existed and were created.'" So the living creatures in this passage give glory to God, and it is tightly tied with worship and praise and honor. And God is worthy to receive that type of glory. And he's worthy because he created all things. So glory is something that can be given by a subject, and it also can be received by a worthy subject. Glory can be understood in a different way also. It can be understood or used in the sense of revealing or revelation. In Exodus chapter 24, a very popular passage, it says, Exodus chapter 24, verse 16, "And the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. And on the seventh day he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud, and to the eyes of the sons of Israel, the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop." But in chapter 33, verse 18, Moses needed more. He needed more than that shrouded cloud and fire. And he said, I pray thee, show me thy glory. Moses needed to know who God was. He needed the smoke to be taken away. He needed the cloud that shrouded the person to be taken away. He needed to know who he was following after so that he could explain it to the million people at the bottom of the mountain. He needed God to be revealed and show his glory. So both ideas are taking place. People give glory to Jesus because of the great miracle that has been done. Jesus gives praise to the Father because his will has been accomplished. So there's giving and receiving of glory in this passage. But also, glory was revealed to the people who are watching the miracle. Power is on display, and it explains who Jesus is. No more smoke, no more cloud shrouding his person. When I think of God's glory being revealed, I often think of, I don't know if you've seen those old pictures from the 50s of during the atomic project when they were dropping nuclear weapons over New Mexico and some of the atolls out in the Pacific. You see the videos of men standing behind huge concrete barriers with protective eyewear on, and they're waiting to see the intensity and the power and the light of the bomb's blast. And the bomb goes off, and it is so brilliant that you can't stop looking at it. But it's also so powerful that you can't get close to it. And I think this is how God's glory is. When Jesus heard his friend was sick, did he run right to Bethany to care for him? How long do you wait? 2 days. Why the delay? Doesn't make sense. Unless you know a little bit about the Jewish history, or Jewish tradition, I guess is a better way to put it. So, by the time that he arrives at his friend's home, it's been, as I already mentioned, Lazarus will have been dead for 4 days. And I am not a math genius, but I worked out the numbers. And if Jesus have left immediately, Lazarus would have been dead for 2 days already by the time he arrived. So the delay is important because of a commonly held belief in Jewish tradition that the Jewish teachers taught. They believed that a person's spirit would hover over top of the body of a deceased person for 3 days before it permanently departed into the realm of the dead. So the 2-day delay ensured that everyone would be in agreement that Lazarus was dead, and not just sleeping dead. Jesus' delay ensured that what he was about to do was beyond the ability of mere men. There would be no confusion between resuscitation versus resurrection. Verse 7. We're going to read 7 through 16. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." And the disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were now seeking to stone you, and are you going to go there again?" And Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." This he said, and after that he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go. that I may awaken him out of sleep." Verse 12. The disciples therefore said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he was speaking of a literal sleep. Then Jesus therefore said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Thomas therefore, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Why didn't Jesus' disciples want to go to Judea? They just tried to kill him. Not too long ago, we just ran for our lives from there, and now you want to go back? And Thomas, at the end, he takes a fatalistic approach to discipleship. He says, "Let us go back so that we can die too." But not all of them felt that way. What does Jesus say to his disciples who don't want to go back to Judea? Verse 9. Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of the world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. Jesus is making a reference to how the Jews and Romans split their day into 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. You know, the hours got shorter in the winter and longer in the summer, but that was the general rule of thumb, 12 and 12. And it was only during the daylight hours that you could work. And work was limited by that time because you had light to see and not stumble around. Was Jesus talking about sunlight? He's talking about himself. John has been telling us since the beginning of the prologue that Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is still on earth. It is still spiritual daytime. Work still needs to be done despite threats against his life. And the Father still had things that needed to be fulfilled in his program. And soon the light of the world is going to be gone. Jesus will be killed. And the work that he is about to do will not be possible for anyone else. So what is it that Jesus is about to do? What great miracle? Most of us know what's about to take place because we read this before. He's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. But the disciples didn't know what was about to happen. Jesus said that he was sleeping, that he had to go wake him up. And the disciples took that literally. So Jesus has to clearly state he's dead. And so he had to delay 2 days before he could go to make sure that everybody knew who was in charge over death. Now, the Greek word for resurrection is anastasios. And this is where we get our term anesthesia from in English. And when you go and you have surgery and they put you under, it looks like you're dead. And the anesthesiologist can give drugs to reverse the medicine and wake you up, and it looks like a resurrection. If you remember in Acts chapter 17, when Paul was teaching about Jesus and the resurrection, the people on Mars Hill wanted him to come up and tell them more about this God. Well, they were trying to add what they thought was a male and a female God, because Anastasios is a female term in Greek. And so they thought they were going to be adding another male and female couple to the pantheon that they worshipped. And once they realized that Paul was actually talking about Jesus coming back from the dead, they tossed him out and said they didn't want to listen to him anymore. That's what, that's the Greek word. Verse 17. We're going to read 17 through 29. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. And Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary still sat in the house. Martha, therefore, said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give to you. And Jesus said to her, Your brother shall rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. And when she had said this, she went away and called Mary her sister, saying secretly, The teacher is here, and he is calling for you. And when she heard it, she arose quickly and was coming to him. So when Martha addresses Jesus, some people say there's a little bit of a rebuke here, like, Jesus, what took you so long? If you'd have been here or not waited so long, this wouldn't have happened. But it wasn't like that. This is a statement of grief and of faith at the same time. If you would have only been here sooner, you could have prevented this. In verse 23, Jesus reassures her that her brother is going to rise again. How did Martha understand that?
She knew of the eventual.
The final resurrection. She was looking down the road. I know, Jesus, in the final resurrection, I know my brother will rise. How did Jesus mean it? It's going to be today. And at the final resurrection. Did every Jew believe in the resurrection? No. Martha's understanding of the resurrection sided with the Pharisees. They believed in it, but the Sadducees flat denied it. So in this passage, Jesus is trying to shift Martha's and ours understanding of resurrection from being a solely future event to understanding that resurrection is an entity that is under the authority of Jesus. And it can only come through him. And he does this with an I am statement. And that establishes authority as the eternal and existent God, the creator of the world, the redeemer, the one who pays the ransom for your soul. That he is Jehovah, he is Yahweh, he is the one that blots out sin and remembers them no more. He is the one with the authority to resurrect the dead today, now, in him, and in the future. He says, I am the resurrection and the life, and he who believes in me shall live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. John has mentioned that Jesus has the ability, has had this ability given to him through the sonship. And we talked about this in John chapter 5. When the Father shows the Son all things that he is doing. So anything that God the Father does, the Son has the authority to do. So in John chapter 5, verse 25, he said, I tell you the truth, a time is coming and has now come when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear it will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him the authority to judge because he is the Son of Man. Do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done good to rise to live, and those who have done evil will rise to be condemned. It is only in Jesus that a man dead in his sins can find life, resurrected from a spiritual death, not just in the future, but today. And the one that participates in that resurrection may physically die one day, but they will enjoy a resurrected life in the end also. And Jesus asked Martha, "Do you believe?" And Jesus wasn't asking if she thought that her brother would be raised on the last day. She had already stated that clearly. He was asking, "Do you believe that I am the one who can provide life and resurrection?" Do you believe is a question of who Jesus is. Do you believe that I am the person with that authority? And Martha's answer was a confident, personal trust in Jesus. And it may be the most complete confession in the entire Bible. Yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Anointed One, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. Verse 30. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but he was still in a place where Martha had met him. And the Jews then who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came to where Jesus was, she saw him, and she fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Verse 33. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. And so the Jews sorry. One of my best friends died a couple of years ago, and this was a passage I did at the funeral. I still have a hard time reading through it, so you can give me a minute. So the Jews said, "Behold how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?" So Mary comes out to meet Jesus. And she is followed by this procession of Jews that come out with her. And some of them were most likely friends and family, and some were probably professional mourners. 2 flute players and 1 wailer was required by the Mishnah. So this procession comes out, and Jesus sees this procession of Jews, and the text says, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews that came out with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. This is a very curious statement. It's an unusual word. It's only used one time here in the New Testament. The statement, deeply moved or troubled. The English word, I think, softens the emotions of what the original word means. The original language suggests that he was really upset with what he saw. This weeping procession caused an emotion in him that's hard to describe. It literally means to snort with anger like a horse would, or to have indignation, or to even lay blame. Those are kind of aggressive terms for witnessing a funeral. To be angry, to be indignant, and to lay blame. Who is Jesus directing these feelings at? Who is Jesus angry at, or indignant towards, or laying blame on? I believe he is angry at sin and death. He's angry at the curse that plagues the world and causes such sorrow. Jesus came into the world to defeat those things. They are his arch enemy. And I believe he is snorting in anger because he is about to engage in battle. One of the commentators said that this word is used in classical Greek stories to describe a war horse that is snorting in battle. Jesus is indignant towards his enemy for what it's caused. And he blames the enemy for such sorrow that is inflicted on his friends. This is the moment when humanity and divinity of Christ is pulling at each other. The Son of God is preparing to throttle his sworn enemy, while the Son of Man is weeping in sorrow for his beloved friends. It's hard to imagine this tug and pull between the natures of Jesus. But like when I'm at work, I deal with a lot of death and dying. And it seems like that my job is, I'm a nurse, if you didn't know, but there is a fight going on when I'm taking care of my patients. It is a technical battle against death. And we lose every time. On the grand scheme of things, we lose every time. And I don't know that I have ever cried when a patient died. I'm not emotionally attached to it. There's the battle, you do the best you can, and you accept the defeat when they pass. But I have been pricked in my heart when I've seen the sorrow of their family sobbing at the loss. And so there's this dichotomy of Jesus's incarnation, where he is there for the battle, which he is capable of winning, but also the humanity side that suffers and is pricked in the heart for the loss. So Romans chapter 12, verse 15, it tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And this is why Jesus cried. The people that he loved so much were suffering a loss and were grieved in the heart. Their suffering moved him to tears. And as judge of the world, he was also angry and snorted at the world of sin and the curse that everyone else suffered under. Did you notice the two sisters, when they come to him at two different times, and they ask him the exact same thing? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But Jesus responds two different ways. To Martha, he says, I am the resurrection and the life, and he who believes in me shall live even if he dies, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And to Mary, he said nothing. He just asked to be led to the graveside, and he breaks down and he cries. To one sister, he responds as the Son of God, divine, authoritative, sent from heaven, the only person qualified to engage in this battle and overturn the curse from the garden. To the other sister, he responds as the Son of Man, a human, grieved in his heart, emotional, experiencing the pain and the sorrow that all of us know when we stand at the graveside of someone you love. This is the Savior that you and I need. One who is a powerful king, who can defeat any foe and free his people from any oppressor. No matter what you have done, no matter where you have been, Jesus can save you. He is the resurrection and the life. But he is also a compassionate priest king, one who understands the struggles that you have and understands the how and the why of all of your hurting. And he feels for you. He's willing to advocate for you before the Father because he understands your sorrows. This passage is an expose on the incarnation, the Son of God and the Son of Man, divinity and humanity in Jesus and on display. Verse 38. Jesus, therefore, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, "Remove the stone." And Martha, his sister of the deceased, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he's been dead for 4 days." And Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And so they removed the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes, and he said, "Father, I thank thee, and thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou didst hear me always, but because of the people standing around, I said it, that they may believe that thou didst send me." And when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died come forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Some have said that the authority of Jesus over the dead was so great that if he had not specified that it was Lazarus, that all of the tombs of the world would have opened. And I believe that's true, because one day God has promised that that is going to take place. Every person who has ever walked this earth is going to hear that loud, crisp call, "Come forth." Some will hear it as a call to resurrected life, eternally at home with the Father in heaven. And some will hear it as a call to a resurrection of judgment. Which of these resurrections you participate in is completely dependent on your belief in Jesus. And it all starts with a confession like Martha's. "I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who has come into the world." Thank you for your attention.